The United States National Park System covers more than 400 sites and tens of millions of acres of canyon, desert, glacier, and forest. Most people who visit see a parking lot, a viewpoint, and a paved loop. They never see the country that starts 50 feet past the last trail sign. Every year, thousands of people are reported lost inside these parks. Almost all of them walk out the same day. A small number do not. In one park, a family of 4 drove into the hottest place on Earth and were not found for 13 years. In another, 2 well-dressed brothers walked into the forest in 1924 and triggered the largest search the park system had ever seen. In a third, someone faked a sighting of a missing man and sent rescuers chasing a ghost. And the story at number 1 is a 6-year-old boy who stepped behind a tree to play a joke on his family and was never seen again. Stick with us for that one. If you like careful deep dives into the places most people drive straight past, subscribe. We put out a new one every week. Today we are counting down 15 U.S. national parks where hikers keep disappearing. Number 15, Rocky Mountain National Park. The park that swallows Colorado's search teams. Here is a number that sounds alarming until you sit with it. In 2017, the National Park Service tracked 198 search and rescue incidents across all of Colorado's national parks. 165 of them happened in this one park. That is not a mystery. It is arithmetic. The park rises to peaks near 14,000 feet, and it is ringed by Front Range cities full of people who can be standing on a trail within 90 minutes of leaving their kitchens. Add afternoon thunderstorms that build out of a clear sky, and you get a lot of calls. Between 2018 and 2020, the park logged 341 search and rescue operations. And yet, for all that volume, Rocky Mountain has only 2 long-term missing persons cases. James Pruitt, 70 years old, went missing in 2019. Before him, you have to go back to 1958 when 10-year-old Robert Bizup vanished near Estes Park. His remains were found the next year, so the headline number is enormous. The unsolved number is almost nothing. Most people who get lost here, the mountain quietly hands back the same afternoon. That is rarer than it sounds, and we are only at 15. Number 14, Mount Rainier National Park. The mountain that keeps its own schedule. Rainier is not really a lost hiker park. It is a mountaineering hazard park, and the distinction matters. The reasons people disappear here are weather, remoteness, and technical terrain. The 3 things that turn a wrong step into a final one. The summit sits near 14,000 feet, wrapped in an active glacier system. Above the snow line, recovery is frequently impossible. A climber goes into a crevasse, or rockfall comes down, and the mountain closes over them in seconds. Here is the part that unsettles people who know the mountain well. The glaciers move, slowly, constantly, like conveyor belts made of ice. Someone lost in one place can surface years later, miles downhill, carried there by the ice itself. That is a strange thing to know while you are standing in a wildflower meadow looking up at a postcard. The view does not tell you what it is holding. Weather, remote terrain, and ice are the reasons the park's rescue logs stay busy and its high slopes stay dangerous. So on Rainier, the question is rarely whether the mountain takes someone. It is when and where it decides to give them back. The ice is patient about it. Number 13, Sequoia and Kings Canyon. The forest that swallows sound. 2 parks run as one authority, covering 1,353 square miles. That is the whole problem in a single statistic. The terrain runs from low foothills all the way up to Mount Whitney, the highest peak in the lower 48. Somewhere in that vertical sprawl, a person can become very small very quickly. The park has recorded 503 search and rescue incidents. 3 of them remain open, and 1 was formally closed without the missing person ever being found. Read that line again. Not abandoned. Not unsolved, but still hoping. Closed. A case file ended with no person at the end of it. The landscape that does this is not jagged or obviously deadly. It is giant sequoias and granite and quiet. The trees are old enough and big enough that they seem to absorb noise. Footsteps, voices, the sound of someone calling for help. You can stand 100 yards from a trail and be completely beyond hearing. People hike here for a lifetime and never feel threatened. The scenery is gentle. The scale is not. One person walked into it, and a closed file is the only thing that ever came back out. Number 12. Big Bend National Park. The car that never moved. Start with how they find out. In the Texas desert, the first sign of trouble is almost never a person. It is a vehicle parked at a trailhead for one day too many. That is exactly how it happened in October 2024. Park rangers noticed a car that had been sitting at a trailhead for several days with no overnight permit on file. They launched a multi-agency search by air and ground, and they found the owner, a 24-year-old man, dead on the Marufo Vega Trail. That trail runs 14 miles through barren desert and rocky limestone cliffs, and it is one of the most punishing routes in one of America's most dangerous national parks. Big Bend earns that reputation by geography. It sprawls across more than 1,250 square miles of far west Texas, pressed against the Mexico border, holding the Chisos Mountains inside a sea of Chihuahuan desert. Heat is the predator here. After that 2024 death, the Park Service issued the kind of warning that tells you everything. Carry water, carry salty snacks, and stay off the desert trails in the afternoon. It does not always end in a body. In late 2023, a 25-year-old hiker named Christy Perry went missing after her rental car was found at the Lost Mine Trail. The search ran 8 days. They found her alive a quarter-mile below the summit, still hanging on. That is the thin margin Big Bend works in. 8 days lost in the heat, and you might walk out. A wrong afternoon on the wrong trail, and the rangers are reading the parking lot instead of looking for you. The desert does not announce anything. It just lets a car sit there, collecting dust, until someone finally wonders why it has not moved. Number 11. Zion National Park. The hike that is also the river. The Narrows is one of the most famous hikes in America, and part of what makes it famous is that there is no trail. You walk in the Virgin River itself, sometimes knee-deep, sometimes deeper, between sandstone walls that rise 1,000 feet and squeeze down to 20 or 30 feet across. There is nowhere to climb. There is only upstream and downstream. Now add water that arrives without warning. On August 19, 2022, a summer storm dropped over an inch of rain on the park. Around 2:15 in the afternoon, a flash flood tore through the Narrows and swept multiple hikers off their feet. Rangers pulled one injured person several hundred yards downstream. Others scrambled onto high ground and were told to stay there until the water dropped. By that evening, the park believed everyone was accounted for. Then the friends of a 29-year-old hiker named Jatal Agnihotri reported that she had not come back. She had wanted to see the Narrows that day. Her friends had turned around because of the flood warnings. She could not swim. The search that followed put more than 170 responders into the canyon. To understand what they were searching, look at the water. During the flood, the Virgin River was running at more than 1,100 cubic feet per second. By the time the search wound down, it had dropped back to 50. They found her body 6 river miles south of where she had been hiking, near a formation called the Court of the Patriarchs. A separate hiker had died almost the same way in 2014 when the river jumped past 4,000 cubic feet per second. She went to see the most beautiful canyon in Utah. In the Narrows, the most beautiful canyon and the flood are the same place. Number 10. Olympic National Park. He only went to take pictures. Here is how ordinary it started. On June 24, 2006, a 47-year-old man named Gilbert Gilman parked at the Staircase Ranger Station on the southeast edge of Olympic National Park. He was not planning a serious hike. He was going to take photographs. He dressed lightly. He wore casual shoes. He carried no pack. On his way out, he stopped and chatted with a park ranger. That conversation was the last time anyone saw him. The loop he set out on is short and well marked. Getting lost on it is genuinely unusual, unless something turns you around and you keep walking out the longer trail along the North Fork of the river instead of back toward your car. Rangers searched hard for 10 days. The whole area was combed. They found nothing. Not a shoe, not a camera, not a trace. In the 18 years since, nothing has ever surfaced. His mother, Doris, said the thing every family in this situation ends up saying: nothing was ever found. In 2015, Washington State did the only thing left to do and declared him legally dead, the legal threshold being 7 years missing, with an absence that cannot be explained after a diligent search. And Gilman is not the only one the staircase area has taken. Back in the 1980s, 2 more hikers went missing near the same spot and were never found either. This is temperate rainforest, some of the densest, wettest, greenest country in the lower 48, where the undergrowth closes behind you like a curtain and a body 50 feet off a trail can stay hidden for years. He went out for a short walk to photograph the forest. 18 years later, the forest is still the only thing that knows where he went. Number 9. Denali National Park. The mountain has a spot it likes. 6 million acres, the tallest mountain in North America, rising to 20,310 feet. In the busy weeks of the climbing season, around 500 people are on the mountain at once, every one of them holding a permit and most of them genuinely expert. Denali does not take the unprepared as a rule. It takes the prepared on the days the weather turns. Most of the disappearances here are mountaineering deaths, and many of them are never neatly resolved because the terrain refuses to give bodies back. Consider one location on the standard West Buttress route, a place called Squirrel Point. In June 2025, a 41-year-old ski mountaineer named Alex Chu was descending the West Buttress, unroped, with 2 companions. He fell roughly 3,000 feet down an exposed rock face toward the Peters Glacier. The 2 people with him lowered themselves over the edge as far as they dared and could not see or hear him. They climbed down for help. Weather, 0-degree cold, wind, snow, kept rescuers off the site for 2 days. They eventually recovered his body. Here is the detail that stops climbers cold. Chu fell at almost the exact spot where, in 2010, another unroped climber, a French mountaineer, had fallen to his death. That earlier climber's body was never recovered. It is still up there, and the mountain does it in other ways too. In 2023, 2 climbers on a peak called the Moose's Tooth, Eli Michel and Nafioun Awal, were swept off the West Ridge by an avalanche. Searchers found their cached skis, their empty tent, gear scattered down a 3,000-foot fall line, and concluded that survival was, in their words, outside the window of possibility. The mountain has a specific place where it does this. It does not hunt anyone, it just waits for someone to stand in the wrong spot. Number 8. Yellowstone National Park. The ground that leaves nothing behind. Here is the thing about Yellowstone that the brochures handle gently. The most beautiful features in the park are also the ones that can erase a person completely. This was the first national park in the world, established in 1872, and it sits on top of a living volcanic system. Geysers, mud pots, hot springs that look like jewelry from the boardwalk and behave like industrial chemistry up close. Between 2018 and 2020, the park ran 371 search and rescue operations across a landscape of dense forest, sudden weather, and ground that is genuinely trying to kill you in places. Documented sources count at least 12 people who have vanished here over the years. Some of those follow the ordinary terrible pattern. A person walks into the backcountry and 2.2 million acres is simply too big to search. But Yellowstone has a category most parks do not. The hydrothermal basins are acidic and superheated. A fall into the wrong spring does not leave a body to recover. It leaves a report, a closed boardwalk, and a family with no remains to bury. That is the uncomfortable answer behind some of Yellowstone's so-called disappearances. They were not unexplained. They were unrecoverable. The park knew more or less what had happened. There was just nothing left to bring home. It is a hard thing to hold in your head while you are watching Old Faithful go off on schedule, surrounded by a few hundred people with their phones up. The same chemistry that paints those impossible colors is the chemistry that does this. The park puts up railings and boardwalks and signs, and people still step off them every year chasing a better photo. Yellowstone does not separate the beauty from the danger for you. It leaves that part up to you. If you are finding this video interesting, drop a like. It genuinely helps these stories reach people who would never otherwise hear them. And tell me in the comments which of these parks you have actually stood in, because I read them. We are halfway now. From here the names stop being statistics and start being people, and the cases stop closing. Number 7. Grand Canyon National Park, the hole that logs the most. If you want the single most active disappearance landscape in America, by the numbers, this is it. Between 2018 and 2020, the Grand Canyon recorded 785 search and rescue incidents, more than any other national park. In that same window, it reported over 900 deaths within its boundaries. Most people who go missing here are eventually found. From 2018 through February 2023, 6 were found dead, and 56 were listed missing, and the majority of those were located alive or recovered. But the canyon also holds 5 of the roughly 29 long-term cold cases in the entire park system. The reason is a trap built into the geography, and people fall for it in the most literal sense. The canyon is wider than the entire state of Rhode Island. You descend in the cool of the morning feeling strong, going downhill the whole way. Then you turn around and have to climb back out in heat that pushes past 110 degrees. The drop and the heat work together. One misstep near an edge, and a person is simply gone from view down into a mile of vertical rock. Here is the detail that stops people cold. If search and rescue cannot find a missing person, the Park Service is not required to keep records of the case at all. No file, no mandated paper trail. So the official count of the vanished is not really a count of who vanished. It is a count of who left enough behind to be written down. The canyon takes the rest off the books entirely. You stand at the south rim, you take the photo, and a mile straight down the Colorado River keeps moving. It has been moving the whole time you have been standing there deciding whether the view is worth the climb. Number 6. Yosemite National Park. The park with the most open files. Yosemite is where the disappearances stop being a volume problem and start being a permanence problem. This park holds 10 entries on the National Park Service cold case list, more than any other park in the system. Out of roughly 25 names on that national list, 10 of them are here in one valley. By raw activity, it ranks second only to the Grand Canyon, with 732 search and rescue incidents between 2018 and 2020. But the rescue number is not what makes Yosemite different. It is the way its cases refuse to close. The villain is granite. Sheer 1,000-foot walls, the kind that make the postcards, Half Dome, El Capitan, and waterfalls fed by snowmelt that move faster and colder than anyone expects. Falls and swift water drownings dominate here, and the same vertical terrain that causes them makes recovery afterward almost impossible. The park runs an entire program built around prevention, warning visitors about the swift water before it ever becomes a search. And then there are the ones the program could not reach. In 1981, 14-year-old Stacy Ann Arris went on a hike with her father's group and walked a little ahead to look at a lake. She was never seen again. Extensive searches turned up nothing. No trace. Her name is one of the 10. That is the thing about Yosemite. Almost everyone who comes here leaves with the same handful of photographs of the same famous rocks, taken from the same pullouts. A very small number leave a file instead, in a drawer that does not get closed. 10 of those drawers belong to this one valley. The walls that everybody photographs are the same walls that keep the cases open. Number 5. Glacier National Park. Don't worry, Mother. In August of 1924, 2 brothers from back east were near the end of a long, careful walking holiday in Glacier National Park. Joseph Whitehead was 29, an engineer for a battery company in Chicago. His brother William was 22 and attended MIT. The photographs that later went on the reward posters show 2 immaculately dressed young men, the kind who wore pressed hiking knickers into the mountains and wrote home to their mother every single day. On August 20th, Joseph closed his last letter with a promise. Don't worry, Mother, we won't go into any danger. 4 days later, in the early morning of August 24th, the brothers walked away from the Granite Park Chalet, heading on foot toward Lake McDonald. Someone spotted them on the trail, dressed in their knickers, smiling, about 10 miles from where they were going. That was the last anyone ever saw of them. When neither brother stepped off the train to meet their mother on September 1st, a search began that lasted 2 years. By one historian's account, it became the most extensive search operation ever conducted in a national park up to that time. They covered the 20 miles of dense forest and broken mountain between the chalet and the lake. They found nothing, no bodies, no clothing, no answer. The Whitehead brothers were entered into a small and terrible category that Glacier keeps to this day: lost, never found. And it is not a category of two. According to the book Death and Survival in Glacier National Park, at least a dozen people have gone missing here and never been found since 1913. The terrain is built for it. Sheer cliffs, waterfalls, rock chimneys, lakes that drop off steeply from the shore, and 1,000,000 acres to hide a person in. One hiker who vanished above Avalanche Lake in 2008 was not found for 4 years, and that was near a trail thousands of people walk every summer. The park's own chief ranger once explained the problem with brutal honesty. People they clearly cannot find, he said, simply because of the landscape, the cliffs, the water, the vegetation. There is so much going on, and if there are no clues, there is nothing to go on. Two brothers who promised their mother they would be careful kept that promise as best they could, and the mountains took them anyway, somewhere in that 20-mile gap 100 years ago. Don't worry, Mother, it was the last thing anyone ever heard from them. Number 4. Grand Teton National Park. Someone faked the sighting. On the afternoon of June 8, 2021, a 27-year-old named Cian McLaughlin set out on a hike in Grand Teton National Park. He was last seen on the trail system that leads toward Garnet Canyon and a stunning, hard-to-reach spot called Delta Lake. He did not come back. He has never come back. His case is still open today. So far, this is a familiar and sad story. A young man, a beautiful trail, a mountain that does not give him back. But the McLaughlin case took a turn that almost no other case on this list did, and it tells you something dark about what these searches actually go through. After he vanished, a 40-year-old woman named Heather McCoskey came forward as a witness. She told investigators she had seen a man matching McLaughlin's description on the evening he disappeared, on the south side of a particular moraine, headed toward Taggart Lake to jump off his favorite rock into the water. She gave a detailed account. She said she had even spoken with him, that he had told her where he lived, where he was from, where he worked. Search teams chased that lead. They poured resources into the area she named. None of it was true. The investigation later revealed she had never seen anyone matching McLaughlin's description that day. Witnesses said she had fabricated the sighting deliberately to keep the search effort going. Because of that single false report, roughly 532 hours were burned, searching the wrong ground, managing the wrong effort, writing up the wrong leads. She was banned from the park for 5 years and ordered to pay $17,600 in restitution. And while crews chased that phantom, the real trail went cold. Computer forensics later showed that just before his hike, McLaughlin had run several internet searches focused on Delta Lake, the opposite direction from where the false sighting sent everyone. The clue that might have mattered was sitting in his search history the whole time. The Tetons are merciless terrain to begin with. Knife-edge ridges, glaciers, talus fields that swallow sound and footing. A search there is brutally hard even when every single person involved is telling the truth and pointing in the right direction. Someone looked at a family already living through the worst week of their lives, and a search team already fighting the mountain, and decided to make all of it harder. McLaughlin is still out there. The lie is the only thing that ever got solved. Number 3. Joshua Tree National Park. A football field away. Start with a man because he did everything right. Bill Iwasko was 66 years old, an experienced hiker who had walked this park before. On June 24, 2010, he set out on a solo day hike toward Quail Mountain, the highest point in the park. He packed water, he planned the route. Temperatures that week were running near 100 degrees, and he knew the desert and respected it. He did not come back. His rental car was found at the trailhead. An official search went out across the rock and the open Mojave, and it found nothing. 11 days later, on July 5th, they called it off. That should have been the end. It was not. A handful of people refused to let it go. A volunteer searcher named Tom Mahood led what eventually became at least 91 separate crowdsourced searches, hundreds of miles on foot, year after year, building maps, filling in territory, trying to think the way a lost and dehydrated man would think. the unofficial search for Bill Ewasco outlasted the official one by more than a decade. In February 2022, nearly 12 years after he walked off, hikers found his remains in the northwestern corner of the park, near where the Panorama Loop Trail runs. Here is the part that haunts everyone who worked the case. They had been close. The searchers, official and volunteer both, had at various points come within what people described as a football field or two of him. For 12 years, the answer was almost within reach, and the desert kept it just barely out of sight. And Joshua Tree did it again. In 2023, a 25-year-old hiker named Trammell Evans disappeared in the same park. His remains were later found near Covington Flats in another corner of the same unforgiving ground. This is not a park that hides people in some vast, trackless wilderness. It is small enough to drive across in an afternoon. The granite piles and the Joshua trees look almost decorative, arranged like a film set. That is exactly what makes it dangerous. It does not look like the kind of place that takes 12 years to give a man back. But it took those years, and in the end it gave him up not to the man who had given his life to looking, not to the rangers, not to the dogs or the helicopters, but to two hikers who happened to walk the right wash on the right day. 12 years, and the answer was a football field away the entire time. Number 2. Death Valley National Park. The family the desert kept for 13 years. This is the one that stays with people, and it starts with an ordinary vacation. In July 1996, 4 German tourists drove into Death Valley. Egbert Rimkus, 34, his son Georg, 11, his girlfriend Cornelia Meyer, 28, who everyone called Connie, and her son Max, who was 4 years old. On July 23rd, they vanished. An intense search and rescue operation combed the park and found absolutely nothing. Eventually, it was called off. 3 months later, in October, a ranger flying over the southern end of the park spotted their rental van, abandoned in a remote ravine. The story it told was the worst kind of ordinary. They had driven off the pavement, chasing a route over a pass, and the tires had shredded in the deep sand. They were stranded miles from anyone in a place that regularly runs past 120 degrees. This is the hottest place on Earth. Furnace Creek recorded 134 degrees in 1913, the highest air temperature ever measured anywhere on the planet's surface. So they made the only choice that felt like action, and it was the wrong one. They left the van and set out on foot, carrying a 4-year-old to find help. For 13 years, that was the entire story. A van, 4 missing names, and 1 single clue. A beer bottle found under a bush, 1.5 miles from where they had stopped. Then, in November 2009, 2 off-duty search and rescue volunteers, Les Walker and a name you have already heard tonight, Tom Mahood, went looking on purpose, not on a call-out, on their own time, years after everyone else had stopped, thinking like the panicked, dehydrated family they were trying to find. They located the remains of the 2 adults out in the deep desert, far from the van. The 2 children were never formally identified. Think about the geography of that. The lowest, hottest point in North America. Badwater Basin sits 282 feet below sea level. A family walked out into it in the worst heat on Earth, and the desert was so vast and so complete that it took 13 years and 2 strangers who simply would not quit to find the edge of an answer. Most people who pass through Death Valley do it with the air conditioning on and the windows up, never out of sight of the car. This family made one decision to drive a little farther down a sandy road. The desert took 13 years to answer for it and only ever answered halfway. Number 1. Great Smoky Mountains National Park. You arrive at Cades Cove and it is the least frightening place imaginable. There is a parking lot. There are picnic tables. On a Saturday morning, the loop road is busy with families and slow traffic and people leaning out of car windows to photograph deer. The air smells like cut grass and somebody's cooking. This is the most visited national park in America, and right here, at the trailhead, you are surrounded by other people. Then you start walking. For the first mile, the parking lot is still behind you, the noise of the cove still in your ears. And then the trail narrows and tips uphill, and the sound changes. The voices fall away. What replaces them is moving water and the dry rattle of leaves coming down. Within a single mile, the most visited park in the country becomes uninhabited mountains, and the blue mist that gives the Smokies their name closes the distance down to a few gray yards in front of you. That is the place. Now here is what happened in it. On June 14, 1969, the Martin family was camping near here with another family they were friends with. There was a 6-year-old boy named Dennis. The two families were walking back toward each other on the trail, and Dennis, like a lot of 6-year-olds, decided to play a joke. He ran a little way ahead to hide so he could jump out and surprise everyone when they came around the bend. He stepped off the trail. The adults were right there. It was a matter of minutes, in daylight, within easy shouting distance of his own father. He was never seen again. What followed became one of the largest searches in the park's history. More than 1,400 volunteers, including the National Guard and the Boy Scouts, combed an area 50 miles across. They searched and searched and searched. They found nothing. No clothing, no trail, no answer. Dennis Martin is one of 4 missing persons cases this park carries on the National Park Service cold case list, and his is the one that has never let go of anyone who learns it. Because this is not a story about deep wilderness, or a careless adventurer, or a man who underestimated the desert. It is a story about a child playing a game 10 steps from his family at the edge of the most popular campground in the most popular national park in the country. The horror of it is the size of the gap. 1 bend in the trail, 1 game of hide and seek, and a forest that, a single mile from the picnic tables, is old enough and deep enough to take a 6-year-old boy and keep him for more than 50 years. People still circle the Cades Cove loop every summer day. The deer still graze in the meadows. Children still run a little way ahead of their parents on the trails, the way children do. And somewhere up past the bend, past the point where the voices stop and the mist comes down, is the last place anyone ever saw a little boy who only meant to make his family laugh. 15 parks, and the lesson never changes. The danger never looks like danger until you are a mile past the sign. For me, the one that stays is Glacier. 2 brothers who promised their mother they would not take any risks, gone for 100 years now in a 20-mile gap of forest. Which of these stayed with you, and which park did we miss? Subscribe, and we will keep finding these every week.